An Indiana couple is accused of neglecting their baby so badly that by the time she was 8 months old, she weighed just about 9 pounds. And as investigators started probing the couple's history, they discovered a pattern of alleged neglect. We are taking a closer look at what police say was behind their arrest as we look at the paperwork, the reports, the interviews, and a lot more. And we're going to break it all down with an Indiana trial attorney. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Now here's the truth. We wouldn't be able to cover a story like this if it wasn't for the incredible support that we get from our sponsor, Morgan & Morgan. I'm talking about America's largest personal injury law firm. I'm talking about a firm with over 1,000 attorneys who have recovered $25 billion for more than 500,000 clients. Think about that. In fact, in the past few months alone, a client in Florida received $12 million when insurance offered just $350,000. Out in Pennsylvania, another client was awarded $26 million. That is 40 times the insurance offer. Morgan & Morgan, they make it easy to fight for what you deserve. You can even start a claim from your phone. So if you're injured, you can start a claim at forthepeople.com/LC Sidebar. You can click the link below or you can scan the QR code on screen. Investigators in Jennings County, Indiana, say that a baby girl's development was likely compromised after her parents allegedly stopped paying close attention to her. An inconsistent feeding schedule, lack of physical contact with the child, and apparent lack of urgency on the part of the parents who are believed to have contributed to the baby's failure to thrive. We are talking about severe child neglect here. So what do? Well, we wanted to find out more about this, and we requested the court paperwork that was connected to the arrests of 25-year-old Benjamin Tackett and 25-year-old Kayla Thompson. This was after their arrest in Mount Vernon on November 5th. In that paperwork, you have medical experts who provided information about the kinds of milestones the baby should have been hitting. Most 8-month-olds, they weigh between 11 and 40 pounds. This baby weighed less than 10. Was showing signs of severe malnutrition. This little girl also reportedly wasn't able to crawl yet. She lacked the core strength that doctors would expect to see at that age. And it was during interviews with detectives that we learned a lot more about this couple and the alleged admissions that they made. For example, Tackett told police that he worked at Pizza Hut, sometimes for shifts as long as 12 hours. Thompson was apparently unemployed, stayed home with the 3 children. And the news release from the Jennings County Sheriff's Office announcing their arrest said, during the interviews with Benjamin and Kayla, they both admitted to knowingly neglecting the child. Benjamin and Kayla advised detectives during interviews that they were tired after work and at times locked the child in a separate bedroom for approximately 10 hours at a time so they could sleep. So to talk about this particular situation, the charges that Thompson and Tackett now face, what we can expect from the court process, and I'm not sure I quite follow it or understand the timeline here of how this happened. I want to bring on Indiana Trial Attorney Ashley Hadler. Ashley, thank you so much for taking the time. Here's the part that I don't get. So the incidents when the Department of Child Services got involved happened last year. My understanding is the police interviewed both of them last year. Why are they only why are we talking about an arrest in 2025? What's the delay?
That is a great question. It seems that the information was all available at the time of the interviews last October. And from review of the documents available on the public record at this point, there was nothing new in addition to that, other than potentially a new case manager getting involved and notifying the police again to begin a separate investigation.
It seems, and we're going to go through this, it seems there is such an emphasis on maintaining children with parents and giving them an opportunity to change that if they promise to do things differently, that's the goal, as opposed to just immediately taking the kids out of their custody, immediately filing charges. I guess that's what we're seeing. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about it, but am I understanding that right?
Absolutely. And that's something that you'll see in most states. And in Indiana, we do focus on reunification and keeping children with their paternal biological parents, if possible. And here, I think you saw the problem was that the reports and information just kept coming in and no changes were being made.
So because these probable cause statements are redacted, they can be a little hard to follow, but I want to go through them because the baby at the center of this case, we believe, is identified as JV1 in the documents. You also have JV2, JV3. These are the other siblings. So the statements refer to 4 DCS documents. 3 of them are called 310 forms, which are filled out for preliminary reports of alleged child abuse or neglect. The statements also refer to one 311 form, which is filled out as part of an assessment of alleged child neglect or abuse. And you have a family case manager who's been identified in the documents as Jessica Gibson. She apparently filled out the forms in her evaluation of what was going on at the home. So according to the affidavit, it reads, home visits revealed underweight JV1, accessible paraphernalia, meaning drug paraphernalia, and utility shutoffs. Safety plans addressed substance use, sober caregiving, and feeding. Neglect substantiated against both parents for substance-related and health issues. Closed without formal case due to improvements, i.e. utilities restored, home cleaned, weight gain. So those apparent home visits took place between April and June of 2024, according to the DCS case manager. And since it seemed that Tackett and Thompson were basically moving in the right direction, the case was closed. Now, Ashley, the caseworker, documented her various home visits, the improvements that she saw each time, or seemingly saw. We actually discussed on a different Sidebar episode today how there's DCS caseworkers are basically overloaded with different cases and families. Have you had experiences dealing with DCS in your practice as an attorney? When you're hearing allegations like this, is this a surprise to you?
It is not a surprise to me because there are issues with funding, resources, manpower. This is something starting with our legislature. There are a number of things that could be altered to provide some relief to DCS caseworkers. I agree with you here. I think the documentation that we're seeing does not align with the picture in the medical records. And so that is certainly a red flag.
Yeah, and these 310 forms appear to have been filled out after there were reports from hospital personnel in August of 2024, so after that other case was closed. And those reports, according to the affidavit, indicate that hospital staff, they were worried about severe malnutrition and hygiene issues like serious rashes and alleged caregiver impairment. When you're seeing a case being brought like this, and you're talking about medical personnel and caseworker reports and police interviews, how does the investigative pipeline work in cases like this? Do hospital personnel have to report to DCS first? Can they report their concerns directly to police? You know, what responsibility does DCS then have when it comes to reporting possible criminal activity? I'm trying to understand the process here.
Sure. So all adults in Indiana are mandatory reporters. So it doesn't matter if you're a medical person or a teacher or not. These medical providers, though, in their experience assessing the children, were seeing things that raised huge concern with them. And so at that point, they took that to DCS, provided all of the medical records, documentation, and they were able to also provide their unique perspective on the fact that these conditions were not caused by an underlying medical diagnosis. There was no explanation for them other than abuse or neglect.
And it seems when you're dealing with these issues that neglect can seem pretty straightforward on its face what it is. I mean, I'm going to get into the charges a little bit more, but who decides? Who decides when something is neglect, when it becomes more than just a DCS case? How does it work?
So DCS has the option to substantiate or unsubstantiate a report. So they make their own decision of whether they believed, based on the facts and circumstances available to them, whether abuse or neglect occurred. Once they've made that decision, they can refer it on to law enforcement, or like you mentioned before, law enforcement may already have another investigation that's going on simultaneously if they also receive a report from a medical provider or the person who reported it to DCS.
And this is the big part. The probable cause statement, it included apparent admissions from Thompson and Tackett themselves regarding the baby's care. And this was made during an interview with the Jennings County Sheriff's Office. Again, we believe this was from last year. The case manager, Jessica, was also there for that interview. And at the time, all the children had been placed with other family members and friends, including JV1. So the probable cause statement reads, quote, parents acknowledge JV1's severe underweight, 9.94 pounds at 8 months, and rash, possible scabies. Kayla admitted postpartum depression, limited interaction, leading to infrequent feedings and diaper changes. She discontinued medications and struggled with schedules. Benjamin described variable work shifts, 9 to 12 hours, reliance on Kayla, and daily marijuana use, away from children but paraphernalia present. Feeding was reactive to cries with bottle propping and no overnight checks. Financial strains affected formula access, specialized type via SNAP, WIC, and appointments were missed despite DCS resources. And the affidavit later states, quote, Kayla Thompson admitted the child's bed was dirty, but stated it was cleaned upon learning of the possible scabies. DCS became involved around JV1's 5-month mark after routine wellness checks revealed underweight issues with formal intervention around 8 months. They both confirmed no other children had issues as severe, though JV2 had underweight concerns until 1 year old due to metabolism and a diaper rash during Kayla's postpartum depression period. JV3 had no such issues. So what do you make of that? I mean, obviously, we look at this, Ashley, and there's a lot of people who struggle as being parents of young children. But those are really, really serious concerns that were documented. Are you surprised that you're seeing them admitting to this and admitting to the struggles that they were going through? And what does this tell you?
In retrospect, it raises major red flags to all of us why the charges weren't brought then. I think there could be some sort of issue between the ongoing DCS investigation and the fact that even if that was substantiated, and I believe it was from the documents, that they believed that the children had been removed from the home, they were in foster care, the weight seemed to be improving. So at that point, I'm not sure why the detective did not continue and push this forward to a prosecutor to consider charges. I will say that there is a discrepancy between a DCS finding of neglect, substantiating that, and the formal Indiana charge for neglect of a dependent. So there could have been something missing with that element that caused them not to move forward at that time.
Yeah, and let's keep that in mind as we talk about the charges later on. But look, there's no excuse. I mean, when they both apparently admitted that the feeding was inconsistent. That shouldn't happen. So Thompson apparently admitted that she would become frustrated with JV1's crying, so she would leave the room. But when Tackett tried to feed the baby, he stated that JV1 preferred her mom, so that led to the baby kind of being resistant. Tackett told detectives apparently that he sometimes propped the bottles in the baby's swing, which obviously can be a danger. And DCS reportedly provided resources like transportation, so Thompson and Tackett could take JV1 to doctor's appointments because they didn't have a car, but the parents only went to a couple before there was a large 2-month gap. And JV1's weight reportedly regressed during that time. A doctor warned that this little girl might have to be hospitalized, but it seems that warning really had little effect because look what we're talking about now. So Ashley, going back to you, parents are provided certain resources, but they have to take them. And they are given, I guess, perhaps some sort of level of leeway, but there's no excuses if a child's life is in danger. Again, these are very, very important legal admissions.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. And it seems that for these particular parents, there were so many resources provided. They had the medications and prescriptions that they needed, and they failed to administer those. They received benefits so that they could obtain specialty formulas that were designed to help the kids gain weight. Obviously, some of the other basic hygiene and feeding and using the transportation that was provided to go to these necessary medical appointments, it is inexcusable that it didn't occur. And it seems like the pattern continued that way for far too long.
Now, according to the DCS documentation, both parents had specific things that they needed to do to make sure these children were safe or their child was safe. Thompson needed to consistently take medications to help her manage her mental health struggles. Tackett swore he would stop using marijuana, which he said he used in an outdoor shed to, stimulate his appetite, help with his own weight issues. But it seems, based on these allegations, that those DCS recommendations, those mandates, they weren't consistently followed. On August 27, 2024, JV1 was admitted to Peyton Manning Children's Hospital by her doctor for what's known as failure to thrive, or FTT, as well as severe malnutrition. She gained weight while she was hospitalized, which confirmed there wasn't a medical reason that she was so underweight. And a timeline of JV1's weight gain, maybe lack thereof, it's part of supplemental medical records that were included with these affidavits. So when she was 5 days old, JV1 weighed around 6 pounds. At 1 month and 3 days old, she had gained a pound. Her weight gain continued, going up to 8 pounds and 15 ounces, but then it yo-yoed. It yo-yoed back and forth over the next couple of months. Now we talk about the charges here. So Tackett and Thompson, they were charged with 4 counts of child neglect each. We're talking neglect of a dependent resulting in serious bodily injury, a level 3 felony, neglect of a dependent resulting in serious bodily injury, a level 5 felony, and 2 counts of neglect of a dependent, which are level 6 felonies. Ashley, somebody might read that and say, wait a minute, aren't these all the same things? Why the variety of charges here?
So Indiana law allows for different levels of severity based on what happens as a result of the neglect. So how severe and significant is the neglect? And then you see the tiers of the felonies going up from there. So I think that's why we see in the supplemental report that the detectives were at one point waiting for feedback from the medical providers at Peyton Manning Children's Hospital to determine, was this a catastrophic injury, and explaining why, so that the prosecutor would have something to evaluate and potentially move forward with.
Are these broad charges? In other words, would it be simple for prosecutors to get a conviction here? Because you're talking about such a vulnerable alleged victim here, right? Somebody who can't care for themselves, and if they are in a dire state, if they're underweight or they have a rash or what have you, there's no explanation other than the parents were neglecting that child, unless there was some underlying condition, which, as I mentioned before, it doesn't seem to be the case. If the child's taken to the hospital and the child starts gaining weight, right? Are these relatively straightforward cases to prosecute and prove?
It seems like it should be, but the burden of beyond a reasonable doubt is a very, very high bar. And I think some of the key language in the neglect of a dependent statutes are the knowingly or intentionally piece. So just speculating if there was any concern that the defendant mother would potentially have a defense related to the state of her mental health at the time. That might be a consideration for the prosecutor in, is this strong enough to move forward with? But then, the other side of that is, of course, they have admitted certain things to the police already. So that would give the prosecutor something to rely on.
Based on these reports, these interviews, do you get a sense of what, you mentioned maybe postpartum depression could play a role here, but do you get a sense of what a defense could be? Is it in the sense, do you feel like one parent may put the blame, the focus on the other parent, particularly if one's unemployed and one's working late? I mean, I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but aren't they both responsible, or have you seen cases before where there is one who blames the other and vice versa?
I think we certainly see cases like that, but I think those cases have a different set of facts than we have here, where it seems like both persons were involved, both persons were very aware of what they needed to do. Like you said before, they were each charged with certain things they needed to personally do. related to what DCS was following them for. So I think this seems very much like a shared responsibility and an absolute failure on the part of these parents.
I wonder if it's also possible, would they call their own medical experts to dispute the findings? Although that feels to me, based on my, cursory review of this, an uphill battle if you're having medical professional. And by the way, if it's documented in photos, I mean, how do you, again, what would even their own medical experts say?
Yeah, it seems like that would be tough, especially because the child improved when it was out of their care. And now that the child is out of their care permanently, we hope and assume it will continue to improve. So it would be hard for a medical expert to refute that, I would think.
Well, look, both parents, they're scheduled to be in court on November 13th for their first appearance, and we will see which way this legal process progresses. But really difficult situation for the children here, thinking about them. Ashley Hadler, thank you for taking the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jesse.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. You can follow me on X or Instagram. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.